Oh yeah, I like some twigware. Yeah, baby, you like that? Welcome to the Doug Rice Show. This is Doug Rice. Welcome one and all. 8 o'clock on the nose, 23rd of the month. Oh my goodness, where has the year gone? It's gone. All right, how are we doing, folks? This is the Doug Rice Show, sponsored, brought to you by Twidware. Twid brand. I'm gonna bring that music down a little bit. How you doing? Good morning. I have a treat for you this morning. I was excited to go live this morning because the treat I have is so good. Now, most of you know over the last few days, I've been allowing the machine to do the reading, and I don't mind the machine doing the reading, but I like doing the reading myself. Okay, and in this respect, what we have today is a treat. Now, you might not know about this publication, but I have it through hard-fought research, and I got it. It's here. It's in my possession. It's called The Birth Dearth. Now, ladies and germs, let me give this thing its full and due attention. The Birth Dearth by Ben J. Wattenberg. Oh, let me hide that out there so you can see it full. Now, folks, there's information and there's information, okay? This is information. This is information they, and I say they, I mean those that are not us and thus and such, I mean they. European people, the population, these individuals you will see in short order do not want us reviewing this publication. Now, I'm going to give you some advice on this now. Look here. You might want to like, subscribe, share. You need to share this one across all your social media platforms because we're going to go over chapter 7, section 4, chapter 7 of this very in-depth diatribe on the decline of the European population. That is right, folks. And I mean, they get into the weeds on this. This was written in 1987, all right? And the author, as I almost forgot, Ben J. Wattenberg. Ben J. Wattenberg. There he is there. Ben J. Wattenberg. I want to give him his due credit. Again, written in first published 1987. Want to take a look at the contents with you a little bit. Here we go. The Birth Dearth. Now, the Birth Dearth itself, it's a gap. That is the best way to describe what they're describing. It's a gap. It's a gap that's widening. It grows exponentially nearly every 10 years or so. And over the years as they flow away, white people will go. Oh, I didn't say it. Well, I did, but here's what we got. We got part 1, the overview. Part 2, demographics. Demography is an interesting subject. Free fall, a little about demographics, the first of the birth fruit, birth death, birth dearth. Economic problems, geopolitical problems. That's where we are going to go. That is where we're going, and we are going into specifically chapter 7, the demography of geopolitics and geoculture. Man, let me tell you, folks, this one's going to be a read. This one is going to do it for you. I'm surmising. I'm getting I'm getting the understanding that you may in fact be demanding more of this reading, as you'll soon be needing. And here you'll see chapter 7 in front of me. Here we go. All right, so the demography of geopolitics and geoculture. Now, pretty wordy in its chapter. Part 4 of this book, The Birth Dearth. And guys, the chapters that precede this chapter go into great detail. They go into numerical calculations, configurations about the decline of their Caucasian nation. It's recessing into the negative far faster than they would care to admit. But this book admits just that. So here we go. I want to be sure that you can see the words in front of me. I know that's always going to happen. They always go forward when I try to do that. That's weird. But here we go. So that's not my hands, by the way. I don't know. Very interesting that it was a brother that took all these photos. Boy, he was trying to. That's because you can't get this in PDF. So I found it, downloaded. I did not do it. Those are not my fingers. Mine are not like. Well, they are like. Okay, it wasn't me. If I had the book, I'd show you. Believe it. All right, the demography of geopolitics and geoculture. So I talked about it a while back that the demography of the globe was studied back in 2018. And it was a secret meeting. It was kind of like the Bilderberg group, but it was involving scientists and highfalutes in that area of their expertise. And one particular area that they studied was demography. And demography, it was a Russian video. I shared it some time ago. You can find it somewhere on my social media platforms. And it talked about what appears to be the contents of this book in a more abbreviated fashion, but very interesting. What we're going to get into are some of the kind of conclusions they're getting toward. And after that, if I have time, if I have voice, I'm gonna give you the indicators, because there are causes, and that's a further chapter. So let's get into the demography of geopolitics and geoculture. Let's educate ourselves, Negroes. And if you like what you see, if you like what you hear, look down there and give vigorously. I'm in dire straits, but here we go. The demography of geopolitics and geoculture, and I'll give it its full attention. So then, this much we know. There is a birth dearth, a widening gap within the calculus of population in our Western world. Birth rates have been well below replacement for almost a generation in some places. There is no sign yet of reversal. Many demographers believe rates are still headed down. There is moderate growth in the nations of the Soviet bloc, a little bit. There is and will be rapid population growth in the third world. Folks, that is the fear that they hold so dear. That's the one factoid they simply can't avoid, that there is and will be a rapid population growth in the third world, which I think accounts and attributes to the energy we're feeling from the first world. But let's continue. We know with some certainty that the birth dearth will create economic change and turbulence in the Western world. With less surety, it is posited here that such economic change will harm us. Will harm us. Folks, now this is from the perspective of the European. This is not from the perspective of the third world. As you can see, it's not written in that perspective. Question: will the United States be a world power, the leader of the free world, if our current population were still 4 million people as it was in 1790? Absolutely not. Or 62 million as it was in 1890. We shall come to an answer, and that answer they come to is no. Let us continue our speculation. Consider a new strand in the argument about the birth dearth, geopolitics and geoculture. I confess that to me it may well be the most important aspect of the birth dearth situation. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take credit for choosing this chapter because I thought that it was extremely important to them. Geopolitics and geoculture as it applies to birth and population, you can believe that's on their minds. All right, so much of what follows stems from an essay on this topic I wrote in collaboration with Carl Zinzmeister, my former colleague at the American Enterprise Institute. He should, however, not be held responsible for every word here. Moreover, the emphases are my own. So we're already cautioned that what will be read may offend some. I believe in the geopolitical and geocultural situation will cause more long-range harm than the economic situation. I believe it with more surety because both the data and the logic of the geopolitical case seem to be more powerful than the economic case. It is serious. Dear God, the foreboding. What's he about to tell us? Consider again the situation originally laid out in chapter 4. Let us say that the modern era began with the end of World War II in 1945. The 42 years since have been a period of Western dominance. I would argue that it has been the most progressive epoch in human history. The Western nations themselves, the most prosperous, most technologically advanced, most productive, and most free collection of peoples ever assembled. For more than 4 decades in alliance, despite perpetual bickering, they have guaranteed a big power peace. The less developed world has also prospered, often under Western sponsorship. That has been an explosion of independent nation states, often modeled, at least in principle, on Western concepts. Although tragic, poverty still exists. The third world has benefited from Western medicine, science, and trade. Even the communist world has prospered from our advance. They have shared our life-enhancing technology, have joined in the benefits of reduced big power violence. Well, up until now. What has caused this remarkable moment? I believe the fruits of Western culture and ideals emanating from modern Western nations have shaped the progressive nature of the world at this time. The specific content of that culture, the precise nature of those ideals are hard to define. More or less, they're almost hard to find. But let me continue. But they clearly involve political freedom. They involve intellectual freedom. They just as surely involve technological innovation. They involve commercial interchange. The leader in this cause has been the United States. It's no wonder that during this time, American, or English if you insist, has become the world's dominant language. Is all this threatened? He asks. Is it all threatened? I fear so. Here we go. Recalling from an earlier chart that this international flowering began when the West constituted almost 1/4 of the world's people. Today, about 1/7 of the world is Western. That may not be a critical difference, but look at the trend. In 25 years, bites. And remember that much of it is already pretty well locked into concrete by prior fertility patterns. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, you need to see what they're looking at. You need to understand the kinds of obscure topics that you may not find interesting are of desperate interest to these beings, because as we see the 25-year increment, 22%. Now, when they talk about Western community, they're talking about Europeans. That's who they're talking about, okay? How do we know this? We know this because at the beginning of this chapter, they made a point in telling you that the third world would blossom in its population. So if they are in fact speaking on West world populations and they're talking about 25-year increments that show a decline, I need you to pay attention to the percentages we're seeing. In the 50s, they made up 22% of the world, 22%. Now, in 85, right around the time this was written, it went down to 15%. In 2010, which is 13 years ago, they were at 13%. Now, we're approximately 12 years out from 8%. Folks, Are you not understanding why maybe perhaps there's this move and movement toward a global conflict that will end in, murder and killing, doing away with millions of lives? They're talking about population control, but for what purpose? Whose population do they want to control exactly? I just want to point this, topic out as something that could contribute to the current world's conditions. We got right-wing nationalism in the south of us. We got right-wing white nationalists in Poland. Argentina just elected a Donald Trump clone. For God's sake, man, in Mexico, they're really feeling themselves. They're little Spanish selves. And they all see the same demographic. They all see the same numbers. They look at these numbers. These are numbers they don't want us to discover because that might energize us. They are energized because of this. By 2035, in 12 years, they're going to be 8% of the global population. What do you think those other, 92% of the people that are not Western going to feel regarding the history they've had to experience with these beings? That's in 2035. Memories are long. By 2060, 7%, and by 2085, you might as well not even call them a group of people, 5% of the population. Now, from 22% to 5% is a pretty big drop. That's a big influence on world dynamics, and they're losing their grip. You're watching the grip of Western society being lost as we speak. They're fighting against colonialistic, Europeanized ideology. This infection that white worship must be the order of the day, that's being pushed back against. And these numbers have a lot to do with that pushing. All right, I'll stop talking. I'll start reading again. What happens when the West is less than 10% of the world, less than 5%? Woo, they're scared. It seems to me unreal to say that nothing happens. Demography is the marathon social science. The rise and fall of nations and civilizations is the tale of long-distance runners. Relative positions are perceived to change slowly, but they do change inexorably. Recall that it was less than 50 years ago that the world's leading geopolitical power was Little England. Remember that, folks. The English ruled the world. They were an empire, two little pale people sitting on a throne calling themselves king and queen. You know what I mean? What happens if Western economic markets become less relevant? What happens if Western nations get to the point where it is much more difficult or even impossible to project military power if and when necessary? Listen to the questions that are being asked of the audience of who was this book written for? Was the book written for Negroes? Of course it wasn't. Negroes weren't expected to read. And I will say again, this is exactly the info that Negroes need. I need you to hear the fear in his writing. That's fear. That's just not informing us here. All right, let's just back at it, folks. Under such circumstances, will Western values remain strong and influential around the globe? Are their influences, are their values worth retaining is the question. And see, in my mind, the Western values that they project aren't the Western values that they hold. That's another story to be told. Or will they wilt, barely noticeable from year to year, victim of an erosion in a political and cultural economy of scale? Will it turn out that after several centuries of turbulent regency, topped off by a half or so century of making it work peacefully and progressively, will we Westerners and we Americans, will we slowly begin to fall behind or drop out of the long-distance race? I say yes, you will. In fact, you'll be outpaced. To answer, we must first ask an elementary question. Do mere numbers of people equate with power and influence, be it military, cultural, or economic? That is a damn good question, folks. Don't you like that question? Do the mere numbers of people equate with power and influence, be it military, cultural, or economic? I don't know. There are 2 billion Muslims in the world. They seem to be getting agitated, don't you think? I don't know. We'll see. Consider first the military situation. Of course, it is quite possible that the modern nations of cultures can remain strong for a very long while, even in the face of the changing demographic balance that is in store for us. Who is he writing this to? He is literally throwing fastballs at white people. He is. There are some examples in history of small populations that seem to have preserved their military and cultural influence among larger neighbors for quite a while. This could have come about through superior organization, technology, or just plain spirit. In the case of the English, it was technology. Where they settled or conquered or asserted their influence, you found the indigenous population was far behind them in the technological advances needed to defend yourself against an invading culture such as these Europeans. But it usually also involved some accretion of demographic power, usually by conquest, with ensuing loyalty by the conquered to the conqueror. So we had turncoats, Uncle Toms in the case of Negroes. Thus, historians tell us that as early as 500 BC, little Athens and other Greek city-states were able to dominate societies much more populous than their own for centuries, in large measure because of their innovative military techniques, the smart weapons of their time. But the ancient Greeks also made allies, at least temporarily, of the lands they conquered: Macedon, the Ionian states, Sicily. Similarly, for centuries, it was Rome's superb roads that played a major role in allowing her to project power all along a 7,000-mile frontier in Europe and North Africa, while her army was never any larger than 500,000, usually closer to a third of that. So what we found here is that the conquering and subjugation of other nations to smaller nations really relies inherently on their technologically advanced condition, or what they may lay down to transport them. In the case of Rome, all roads lead to Rome. That is a take on the fact that what we just read, that 7,000-mile frontier, with only about 500,000 soldiers, of less than a third than that. That's interesting. But I wonder how that plays in the future against these creatures. I don't know. Let's take in more of their features. But again, the Romans accredited demographic power by conquest of a variety of European peoples who remained loyal for centuries. When the loyalty collapsed, so did the Roman Empire. Listen to that, folks. Do you hear what the guy said? Did you listen? When their popularity, when their support collapsed, what's happening right now to the American and Western world is that the support for them is collapsing globally. Slowly but surely, brick by brick by brick, they seem to be, falling by the wayside by bricks. More nations joining BRICS, some not joining. The change of currency on a global scale is one of the most difficult feats to pull off, but they're attempting it, and in the face of the United States, for goodness sakes. Let's continue. All right, so where was I? I got it. Relax. One of the important, no, I wasn't there. When the loyalty collapsed, so did the Roman Empire. When the loyalty collapsed for America, so will America. Important nations today, like the Romans of yore, are still interested in projecting power. One of the important tools for power projecting these days is called aircraft carrier. Wow, as Libya's Colonel Muammar Gaddafi learned in 1986 with a final lesson some years later, and look at what they're doing now. I'm going to go ahead and just pause for just a sec because you need to hear this. You know, they have aircraft carriers, the Ford and another one, I believe the Kennedy, maybe, I don't know. And they're in different seas over in the Middle East. And where they're projected, I think one's in the Red Sea, one's in the, wherever they are. They have full coverage of the Middle East, and they have Tomahawk missiles. And just interesting that this book written in 87, 80, whenever it was written, that they still use that tool to project their power, aircraft carriers, while their influence wanes. You get it. But to note that there can be some compensations for population inferiority does not mean that population does not matter. For while it is not all clear where the tipping point lies today, it usually has been true that no amount of technical superiority, why didn't they just technologically superior? Technical superiority could balance a gross lack of population over a long period of time. So effectively what this is saying, that it doesn't matter that they have ships that can cover just tens of thousands of square miles, millions of square miles in the Middle East. If their population declines, their technology will not support their rule. That's an interesting point. This appears to be equally true today for nations, for alliances of nations, and for the superpower leaders of alliances of nations. For example, the superpower situation seems this way. While a large population does not guarantee great power status, a nation cannot be a great power unless it has a large population. Whew. Now that's interesting. Wow. The United States and the Soviet Union are large population superpowers. China and India have large populations, but are not superpowers. Well, now they are coming into their own. Thus, even in an age of missiles and submarines, no nation or group of nations without a substantial population can hope for lasting global influence. Perhaps it should be said, especially in an age of missiles and submarines. For the advantages of a large labor force, the economies of scale and production and big military establishments are of vast importance in the military high-tech world. Larger populations produce a larger gross national product, and brute economic production is one critical aspect of national strength and security. Larger populations can build more easily than infrastructure. The infrastructure of industry, transport, and communication, all of which support national defense. National power, after all, is in some way related to the number of railroad cars, cyclotrons, roads, hospitals, electric plants, and universities a nation possesses. And then there are scientific, hold on, in the United States. Moment, I love it when she interrupts me. And then there are scientists. Attaining technological leadership requires collecting a large, I can't believe this. And then there are scientists, because the page is slanted, folks, my apologies. Attaining technological leadership requires collecting a large critical mass of scientists. Only a large consumer market can support much industrial scientific innovation, which often spins off into the military field. Stop for a minute. I remember Operation Paperclip. Do you? I do too. I remember after World War II, after it ended, the influx of invited immigrants, those who were casualties of the war, and those had to have certain criteria met in order to be considered for U.S. citizenship. I'm reminded of the previous First Lady's genius visa. I don't know where that came from. I think just because she speaks several languages. But that is something that we must pay strict attention to. And it seems the comfort of the American system they created has now caused a lackadaisical attitude toward procreation. And as we can see by what they're screaming at the top of their lungs, it's important that you have a population that supports the things that have been created. This is all going down, folks. Only a large society can tax its people enough to finance major research and development directly for the military. And of course, a large society makes it easier to provide the manpower for the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force. And what are they doing today? They're literally considering a draft because these young folks don't want to fight. They don't want to die is what they want to fight, but they don't want to die. Let's not get the two confused. Coffee. That being said, they are on the decline almost exponentially in my mind, but let's continue. Now, let it be noted, in none of these areas is a large population itself enough to produce success. But in each instance, a big nation is likely to have a strategic advantage. Thus, one of the conventional lessons of the U.S. Civil War was that a larger nation with a larger industrial economic base, the northern states, can contribute a great deal toward overpowering a less populated area, the larger rural South. This was so even when, as is generally accepted, the South had more highly motivated soldiers and better generals. Now, that is a factoid I did not know, that the South had highly motivated soldiers and better generals. Did you know that? That's an interesting fact. That's interesting. I like that. Likewise, remember the World War II, U.S. had at the time a population about twice as large as the Japanese. Although a surprise attack and advanced military preparation gave the Japanese early victories, our logistical advantage ultimately crushed the Japanese, even though they were simultaneously fighting in Europe. We were. So, very, very interesting. The basic equation holds true even in an atomic age. Only large populations have tax bases broad enough to support the defense systems, which are the basis of national power and security. This includes not just research and development as mentioned above, but weapons themselves. A single new heavy aircraft carrier costs $3 billion to build. It costs many $billion to operate over its lifetime. And the costs are so prohibitive that only two nations, the United States and USSR, have launched new heavy carriers in the last 10 years. These are two of the four most populous nations in the world, each with populations nearing the 250 million mark. Now, what are we learning? What are we hearing? What are we seeing? I'll tell you. What this dude is being is an alarmist on a subtle scale. What he's doing is transferring the message without fail. He's letting Americans know that it's pretty much over. There is no recovery since this writing, and I'll tell you why I say this. This is back in the 80s, and since then, can you see what's happened to them? And now they're in complete disarray. And the last thing they're considering now is getting a leg. So they're not going to increase their population. I think their population will decrease. At least that's what I think. All right, so you are going over with me something called the Birth Dearth. This is the Doug Rice Show. I am Doug Rice. I am brought to you by Twidware. You know why I'm brought to you by Twidware? Because Twid is a brand. And that's what I do. I say it. So the reason I give a break usually around the half-hour mark is to give a little bit of a little credibility to the Twid man himself. There you go, folks. Now, we don't just have apparel. We don't just have clothing. There are not just, there's not just something to wear. There's also, and I'm going to bring the music up, we got skin care. All right? Now, the Doug Rice Show brought to you by Twidware is, this is what I do. I do the show every day. Twid has brought to the fray some new information, a new way of me to do and say what I say. And I hope you enjoy the effort, because if you do, he is to blame. All right? Just to give you that. And use the promo code TDRS. For goodness sake, use it. It gives you 10% off all Twid wear. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and I will be back here in just a second. You guys go ahead and relax for me just one moment. Oh, yeah, folks, I am back just like that. The Doug Rice Show brought to you by Twidware. Just wanted to take a 5-minute break for you there. We are going over the Birth Dearth. It is a great, great publication. Very, very rare find for you in the nation. You got to check this out. And I got to tell you, it's an amazing look. We're going to go over the book into the demographics, the population, and what their expectation is. So let's get down to biz. We're going to pick up where we left off. Do me a favor, folks. If you like what you're seeing, first like, subscribe, share this, because I try to give you the best kind of information I can, and I do it as timely as possible. All right, so let's continue with the reading, because I can tell you it's what you're needing. So what we're going over here is the fact that they have asserted that without a population, it's difficult to sustain what you might call a superpower. This being written back in 1987 or 1986, whenever it was written, gives you a very future view of what we see now and the decline that the Western civilization is on. They are being rejected offhand. Their values, the deals that they've made with African nations are being exposed. When you buy something for 6 cents and sell it for $200, you're ripping somebody off, folks. Let me just tell you. So we're going to continue with the reading, and hopefully you guys will appreciate what you're seeing. Here we go. So, and again, this is Demographics, the Demography of Geopolitics and Geoculture. And it's very important, because this is at the core of white fear. White fear involves being replaced. And the replacement doesn't come out of a vacuum. There are two sides to being replaced. One is population growth. The other is population decline. So we'll figure out what this guy has on his mind. Here we go. Now consider Britain, a modern nation with a population of 56 million. A few years ago, it did not feel it could afford even to operate the light carriers it already possessed, and was poised to retire all but one for economy's sake. Then came the Falkland Islands War, and the British government temporarily changed its mind. Currently, Britain is straining its defense budget just to build 4 new ballistic missile carrying submarines to replace the 4 now in service. The new subs will cost a total of over $12 billion, an average of about $550 per British taxpayer. On a per capita basis, the subs would cost the U.S. taxpayer about a quarter of that amount. So consider that factoid. That's very interesting. It plays into the ability of a nation to defend itself militarily or exert itself militarily. So if Americans are paying $125 and the Brits are paying $550, it's more likely that Americans would get new subs, as they've done. Perhaps the clearest example of a national security system that could not possibly be built by other than large nations is the SDI, the Star Wars Peace Shield Initiative. Total cost range in about $1 trillion area. Can you believe that? It could be put together only if it is feasible and worthwhile by amortizing it out of a large population. So the only way you're going to pay for that is out of the population. If you don't have the population, you're not going to get it. National security benefits of a large population accrue most clearly to nations that are already modernized. But even when very poor and disorganized, large nations must be taken seriously in global calculations of power. And they want you to consider China and India. Both have per capita incomes of under $300, but because of the aggregated weight of their economic production, their masses of soldiers, and the near impossibility of an aggressor ever subduing such large populations, they are accorded national power, all out of proportion to their low economic condition. Now, again, I'll tell you the mission of this reading. It's to understand the fear they're feeding. You understand? I know that it's, I know that the topic may not be one Negroes seem associated with themselves, but it does. It does. Because when you can determine what they're afraid of, that almost gives you control over the dynamic, almost control over the circumstances, because you know what to avoid and what to say. And their fear is never going to go away. They fear being replaced. What can I say? I don't know what to tell you. Here, let's continue. I want to see some more of this. All right, so one of the clearest indications of this is the Soviets' positioning of so many troops, over 50 Soviet-style divisions on or near the border of poor, underdeveloped China. Nor is it coincidental that both China and India are also nuclear powers. With all their poverty, they can be nuclear powers only because they are demographic powers. And since the writing of this book, China's economy has grown stronger. It's lessening now. But India at this point has a surging economy, and he would literally eat his words right now. Of course, this is not to say that modern military technologies can't go a long way toward compensating for an inferior population level. The Israelis, here we are at the meat. A nation of 4 million surrounded by more than 100 million hostile and potentially hostile neighbors have amply demonstrated this over the decades. Well, have they now? Now you know why I got to this, don't you? Secret's out. Yes, this is why this was chosen. But several things must be remembered. First, Israel had its own population explosion. It came about in a large part because of substantial immigration. Now listen. The other factor was a high Jewish birth rate in Israel. For Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews alike, that rate today is just about the highest of the modern nations, about 2.7 in 1984. If Israel's Jewish population had remained at the 600,000 figure, it was at when the state was founded in 1948, instead of the 4 million it is today. It is hard to imagine that Israel could have survived. All right, now you see. So, what an interesting fact. 600,000 Jews, Israelis, more likely European Jews. State was founded in 1948. And from that, they've grown to 4 million. Now, you need to hear this. They've put 300,000 in battle. 300,000 of their now 6 million, perhaps, or whatever their population might be. But back then, I just thought that fact that drew me to this. It's an amazing thing that they call them Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews alike. And they talk about the fact that these folks come from Europe, that they are immigrants, that doesn't mention a return. I thought that was interesting. So there you learn. All right. So, and further, if not for the special nature of its relationship with the United States, a nation as small and beleaguered as Israel would find it difficult and perhaps impossible to afford the sophisticated weapons that we see today, which are necessary for its continued existence. The United States provides Israel with credits and subsidies of several $billion per year. Nearly $1,000 per Israeli citizen. You hear that, folks? And even so, the Israelis must devote 30% of their gross national product to defense, require military service up to age 49, and operate on a permanent militarized footing with a spirited and well-educated military. And so again, folks, we see the turn of the worm historically. We see that even back then in the 80s, it was on the minds of these individuals that study demography, geopolitics, and geoculture, Israel's place, the state of Israel's place in the infrastructure of geopolitics. And I like the fact that it points out that the small population is afforded so much wealth given to it by the United States, as they, at this moment, proudly murder Palestinians at whim, using those very weapons given to them. I thought this would be a good, interesting read and how it kind of folds into what we need. So let's continue. And if you like this and it massages your mental sinew, give to the links below so I can keep on with the Doug Rice Show, All right, so where were we? I'm just kidding. That's a lot. $1,000 per citizen. That's pretty good. $1,000. And even so, the Israelis must devote 30% of their GDP. I said that. Besides, unlike the Israelis versus the Arabs, most nations in most circumstances cannot assume they will have a continuing technological and educational advantage over their rivals. And if opposing nations maintain an approximately equal level of scientific, educational, material, and industrial advancement, it is the population level that can make a major difference. Very interesting. That is why it can be dangerous when traditional competitors suddenly move along different demographic paths. Certainly the French felt that the balance of power was shifted fatally against them when, in the late 19th century, their growth of population dramatically slowed, while that of their European competitors continued upwards. France had known a position of considerable population and advantage over the British, Germans, and Austro-Hungarians. But by the early 1890s, it was inferior in size to all three. Now, let me see. I will give you this, folks. The folks that are most scared are the ones that have been through this before. And the French are very vocal about being bred out of existence. For every one French child born, there are 10 Arab immigrant children born. That's a statistic. That's one of the statistics that came from the meeting they had in New Mexico in 2018 during the Trump administration in the area of demography. So what an interesting, in continuing that thought regarding the French population, I consider that it made a much easier target as the Germans went against them. And of course, the French needed to be rescued by the Americans, similarly to the Jews having to be rescued by the Western world. They didn't pull themselves out of ovens. I will say that. And I won't detract from that because they won't talk about why they were put in ovens in the first place. Yeah, I gave you that. Yeah, I said it. That's what I do. The population plays a heavy role in both the military and military-related economic spheres. It should be clear that it is also potent in the international political realm, where not only military power, but wealth are the chips in the games that nations play. In a world increasingly interdependent in economic matters, the sheer sizes of domestic markets and labor forces are among the critical variables in international competitiveness. America's wealthy continental market of 240 million people, now 320 million people, gives it geopolitical influence and leverage that smaller populations do not have. How many Hondas can you sell to Holland? Conversely, it is not an accident that Holland is not able to produce jumbo jet aircraft like the Boeing 747. As in life, so in politics. Other governments or foreign corporations have to try to be nice to the big fellows on the block. And there are dimensions of power and influence beyond the standard military, economic, and political ones. Culture counts. Culture counts. Can you imagine the culture vultures telling you that culture counts? It is the primary goal of American and Western policies to see to it that our values can survive. And one hopes and spread. Well, really, if the peoples of the world admire Western values and seek to adopt Western values in their own ways for their own uses, we are stronger and safer. Again, folks, they are consumed with fear. That's what this book is about. This book is about the fear they have of being here no more. That is really, and they want the rest of the world to embrace their values. Now, I've looked at the values the United States has spread. I've looked at the values these Europeans have said, and they're not valuable values. Those values will, they might make you end up dead. I don't know. I mean, what are we talking about? What values have you received from these beings you believed? All right, I'll stop. Let's get back to it. We're almost done. All right, so we then have a better chance that our children will live in a user-friendly world that honors the values we honor. No. You don't seem to understand. Your values aren't valuable. I said that, didn't I? I did. In large measure, that is why our government funds the United States Information Agency, Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and Radio Liberty, the National Endowment for Democracy, Student and Cultural Exchange programs, as well as certain aspects of the CIA, the Peace Corps, and the Agency for International Development, just to begin a long list. They are all part of the contest of ideas. Our allies are involved in many similar ventures for similar reasons, and so are our adversaries. As never before, we all know that ideas move people. If Western culture flourishes, we flourish. If it falters, we falter. Well, you got to remember, you stole whatever culture you might have anyway. All of Western culture is one grand theft of the culture of dark-skinned people. They mimic what they have found and then call it their own. They are not in any way the seat of civilization. Europeans are nothing but copycats. And there's that. Does population, its levels, its direction, influence culture potency? Of course it does. Population, as we have noted, influences power, economics, and politics, and these factors clearly interlink with culture and values. How? Weak nations tend to emulate strong ones in many ways. Big and wealthy nations produce and export goods and services that directly or indirectly transmit values and culture. The United States imposes its values and culture by what it sells to the rest of the world. Big and wealthy nations produce and export goods and services that, I said that. Okay, consider only one example for the moment. Why do American movies and television programs dominate the global market? Why do they do that? In order to spread their hate of Negroes and to marginalize Black people and to put us in a certain frame in front of the world. So that the continuation of the conspiracy against us continues in the minds of the people that claim they weren't involved. That's why. Okay, sorry about that. Start and answer by asking a different question. Why don't Dutch movies and television programs dominate the global market? Because there's an economy of scale in some aspects of culture, just as there is in military weaponry or in the automobile industry. Nations that are populous and wealthy enough to build aircraft carriers can also amortize the cost of a multitude of high-budget television dramas, sitcoms, and movies. And who is at the top of the triangle when it comes to controlling these edifices, television dramas, sitcoms, movies? Who controls all that? What are the people that have control over the media, the information in the United States that spreads across the world? Why do American movies and television programs dominate the global goddamn market? We know why. Such products already profitable or near break-even in a large domestic market can be sold overseas at relatively low additional cost. And when Dallas is on the air every week in Algeria and then denounced scene by scene in mosques by fundamentalist mullahs, on balance, the West, believe it or not, benefits. Modernism is what the mullahs fear, and it's what we believe in, even if Dallas shows a sordid side of it. Perfect. When cassettes of American movies circulate in the Soviet Union, cassettes, the viewers are astonished, not so much by the violence or the sex, but by the backgrounds and the street scenes, showing a level of living unimaginable in Russia. The common person in the 80s living in the United States was living like a king to the folks in Russia. It is interesting, for years now, Americans have been bemoaning the fact that the Japanese manufactured most of the world's estimated 150 million VCRs, even though the original technology was American. What we forget is that while Japanese sell the hardware, America sells the lion's share of the software in the world. Movies, rock music, television programs. Indeed, these days one can make the case the world is flooded with the manifestations of a full range of American culture, good and bad, ranging from political campaign techniques to clothes to fast food, movies, music, television series. Henry Luce may have been right when he said this would be the American century. That doesn't happen in all big, populous, strong countries, but it is hard to imagine that in this day and age it can happen to little, weak countries. We come to a final thought. Democratic values are contagious. Yes, they are, because they are chock full of hedonism, self-gratification, do what you wantism, disrespect your parents, sex out of marriage, homosexuality, all these things democracy has to offer. I understand. They have spread remarkably in the last 2 centuries. The democratic ideals need carriers like infectious hosts. Who are their carriers? Powerful nations in recent times, primarily in the United States, France, England, and a few others. If these national carriers are weakened in the relative scheme of things by diminished population strength and its outward ripples, is it possible that the spread of democratic values may be slowed or stopped or reversed? Well, I'm hoping for the latter. Listen, folks, it's just an insult to the intelligence of people that read to surmise that democratic values have any value. What these Europeans spread, the hedonistic kind of lifestyle, the casual lifestyle, usually do nothing to work, just live, exist, and somehow get paid to do that. That's their dream. And what they're after, if we can just cut through the subterfuge, is a white utopia. That's what they're looking for, and they're not going to get it. What they're going to get shortly are chains, because they're going into slavery. Now, I just want to, now that my voice seems to come back a little bit, there's a portion of this which itemizes the causes. Now, I'm not going to go through each of the causes, but this is another chapter, causes. And it's chapter 10. But the causes of their decline, unavoidably, he says, I alluded many times in this book to the variety of causes that have led to birth dearth. Now, I'm going to go through a few of the headings. First, he blames socioeconomic factors, urbanization. That just means black folks. Stop, man. He means us. He don't like the fact there's too many of us. Education goes up for women. Fertility goes down. Are you listening? Education for women. Listen to this dude. Wealth. As income goes up, fertility, and they want to be wealthy. That's all they want to do is be wealthy. That's what they project. Another thing that is marking the decline of Western civilization, Europeans, white people. Working women. He says working women, probably single most important factor in eliminating the white race. That's exactly what this book is about, folks. Let's keep it in place. What next? Now he gets into the legal, technological, and medical factors. Abortion. That's what you want? Y'all want the freedom to abort as many humans as you can. You want the ability to screw ad infinitum, no consequences, no accountability. That's the kind of democracy you spread. Contraception. That's interesting. That's contributing to your demise. Lifestyle. Delayed marriage. Yeah, no marriage, just, coming together and then aborting together. Coming together, aborting together. All right. Delayed birth of the first child. White folks don't want no children no more. Let's talk about it, folks. Let's not get into the fray. Let's just say what we're going to say. What? Divorce. They can't stay married. They get married to get divorced. Decreased fecundity. Now, this is interesting. Women have more medical risk, non-sexual sense, infertility rates, hearing stories, desperate couples, something going on with fertility. So they're blaming that on their decline. What else? Just to get it over with. Male homosexuality. That's attributing to their decline. Never married, male homosexuality. Lesbianism. That's what's contributing. These are the democratic values. The values that they want so desperately for the world to embrace are the very values that are removing them from this place. Unmarried couples, women's liberation. This is him talking. Costs too much to raise a child these days. Good Lord. Environmentalism. I don't understand this. So this is what they say has contributed to their demise. These are the reasons for their vanishing in their eyes. And you need to understand this, folks. I need you to get this because the point should not be lost, okay? What we're looking at here, all this stuff that they want forced upon everyone, they want you to embrace democracy because that's what it comes with. That's what it comes with. Okay. That's what it comes with, right there. Okay? It's just ridiculous. So, what have we learned? I don't know. We learned something, though. I do appreciate you coming to see the show. I'm going to do this. Anybody got any questions? How about that? Anybody got any questions? There's not too many of you here. I will take questions because I've never done this before, so let's do this. Anybody take? No, nobody says. Somebody says nope, no, thank you. Okay, well, I thought I'd throw it out there. There's no need to involve yourself if you're just adamant about it. Okay, that's good. No, I've been talking a minute. I just thought if you had some questions, if you wanted to say something, let me know. If not, that'd just be the end of the show. All right, folks, that's it. That's the Doug Rice Show. Very informative, cerebral kind of information. I know not everybody to me, that you know. This is the Doug Rice Show. I am Doug Rice. You have been here far too long, and I appreciate you being here. Brought to you by Twidware. And as you can see, Twidware is the epitome of what I like to say, quality. All right? We're going to get out of here, folks. It's 9:05. Did about an hour show. I just wanted to say that and go. The Birth Dearth, Demography of Geopolitics and Geoculture. They're terrified. All right. Hey, shop on twidware.com. And whatever you do, folks, don't walk around with a smile on your face. Okay? That's right. I said it because that's what I do. Bye-bye.